Good evening. You're watching a special report from the Human Error News Network. Now, tonight, we're not actually covering some huge disaster. We're looking at something much smaller, but way more important. A single decision. The one decision that decides if a simple mistake spirals into a catastrophe, or if it becomes the very thing that makes you stronger. Stick around because we're about to open up the failure playbook. All right, picture this. It's just a normal day at the office. An engineer pushes a tiny update, something they've done 100 times. But then, the alarm starts screaming. Customer data is exposed, visible to people who should never, ever see it. The mistake itself? It's simple. It's human. But the question that comes next is the one that really matters. Who's going to get blamed for this? I bet your first instinct is to find the person who clicked the button. But what if that's the completely wrong question to be asking? See, every single time something goes wrong, you're standing at a fork in the road, and there are only two paths. Down one path, you have the blame culture. This whole world is built on fear and secrecy. The main goal? Find a scapegoat. And you know what the outcome always is? You're doomed to repeat the exact same mistakes. But then there's the other path, the learning culture. This one's built on psychological safety. The focus isn't on a person, it's on improving the system. And the outcome? Well, that's how you build real resilience. Look, we've all been there, right? That horrible, sinking feeling in your stomach the second you realize you messed up at work. And what's your first thought? It's not, how can we make the system better? No, it's, how do I not get fired? That reaction is the natural result of the blame game. The moment we start hunting for a person to punish, we guarantee that the next person who sees a problem will do everything they can to cover it up. And that right there is a recipe for absolute disaster. So here's the big idea we have to get our heads around. Human error isn't some kind of character flaw. It's a signal. Think of it like data. It's your system telling you where your processes are confusing, where your safety nets have holes, and where everything is just under too much stress. When an error pops up, the system is basically begging you to take a closer look. Pointing a finger at one person, that's like blaming a single raindrop for the flood. And this brings us to the fundamental law of this whole thing. It is a choice, and there is absolutely no middle ground. The second you decide to blame a person, you slam the door on any chance of actually learning from what happened. Why? Because the real story isn't who messed up, it's why the system let them. You can't possibly investigate a system if your only goal is to prosecute an individual. Okay, so this all sounds good in theory, but what does a learning culture actually look like when the pressure is on? Let's get into a real-world example. When LGU Plus's AI call app called Ikios had a data leak, they were staring right at this choice. And what they did next, well, it's basically a masterclass in how to respond to failure. Our investigation uncovered this timeline. And honestly, you have to look at the speed here. The work that caused the error starts at 8 p.m. By 10 a.m. the very next morning, their own team finds it. Just 1 hour later, the leak is completely plugged. And then, a few days after that, they aren't trying to hide it. They are proactively reporting it themselves to the authorities. That's not a panic move. That's a process. So what was this giant company-shaking error? A cache misconfiguration. Seriously. To put it simply, a setting was flipped the wrong way during an update. It is the textbook definition of a simple human mistake that could happen at any tech company, on any team, any day of the week. The kind of thing that, in a blame culture, gets someone walked out the door that same afternoon. But this is where LGU Plus made their choice, and they made it public. They didn't invent some story about a sophisticated cyber attack. They didn't blame a third-party vendor. They just owned it. They said this was on us, it was human error. And that one sentence completely changed the conversation from who do we punish to how do we fix this and be honest about it. And this right here really shows you their commitment. By law, they only had to report this thing if more than 1,000 people were affected. But look at the numbers. Only 36 customers were actually impacted. Legally, they were totally in the clear, but they reported it anyway. You gotta ask why. Because in a learning culture, transparency isn't about doing the bare minimum, it's about earning back trust. They were also incredibly specific about what happened. They laid out exactly what data was exposed, phone numbers, call times, and, maybe even more importantly, what wasn't exposed. No social security numbers, no passport info, no financial data. This kind of precise communication stops people from panicking and shows that you are actually in control of the situation. Nothing was hidden. So the big question is, how do we take this amazing case study and turn it into a plan that we can actually use? LGU Plus didn't just get lucky. They followed a repeatable protocol that turns failure into fuel. So let's break that playbook down. Here it is, the 4-step playbook. Step 1 is detect. You have to build a place where people feel safe enough to raise a hand and say, I think I found a problem, without fear. Step 2, correct. Your first, last, and only priority is to stop the damage immediately. Step 3, communicate. Go talk to the people who were actually affected. Be direct, be honest. And finally, step 4, report. Get ahead of the story. Tell your stakeholders and the authorities what happened. Don't ever wait to get caught.
And that brings us right back to where we started. It's all about that choice. Every single time something breaks, you can ask, whose fault is this? And build a team that's terrified. Or you can ask, how did our system let this happen? And build a team that's resilient. The protocol itself is simple, but making that choice, that's profound.
So this playbook is fantastic for dealing with those fast, obvious errors. A data leak you can spot and fix in just a few hours. But it brings up a much tougher question. What are you supposed to do about the silent failures? The hidden bugs, the flawed logic, the things that sit dormant in your systems for weeks or even months before they finally blow up. How do you start hunting for the errors you can't even see yet?